So let's put our new Demon Primarch through his paces. Who's most likely to win in a 1v1 deathmatch with Fulgrim versus every faction leader in Warhammer 40k? Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today for something fun and a bit different I thought we'd do a damage challenge to see what Fulgrim is capable of and basically throw him into the ring versus just about every faction commander in Warhammer 40k and see who lives and who dies. For this one it's mainly going to be a damage contest for fun, certainly not really determining which model is best in game given that quite a lot of 40k's faction commanders do big buffing things for their armies and there's all sorts of other supporting rules and units to consider, so mainly take this as a fun thought and maths experiment. As mentioned, this one's going to be Fulgrim versus the majority of faction commanders in Warhammer 40k, either the ones that you'd say are overall in charge of the army or a named melee character if they don't have them. There are a few factions that maybe don't really have a named character quite so much, like Chaos Knights and Genestealer Cult, and for this one I'm not going to be looking at the Divergent Chapter Masters, or anyone named Inquisitor either for the Imperial Agents, who, spoiler alert, for a lot of standard size Space Marine things would get cut down pretty convincingly anyway. I did choose to include the Nightbringer though, as another example of a big bad that might be interesting to see who comes out on top in a 1v1 duel. Similar to previous damage contests I've done in the past, we'll have one command phase shooting at less than 12 inches and then a fight phase. Fulgrim can opt to fights first, as we'll get to in a second, and for any special rules and things both parties count as charging. Then after that they're both still standing. They'll go on to have multiple successive turns of doing the same until a victor emerges. For determining the winner this time around, it'll be the model with the greatest chance to slay the opponent across multiple rounds of combat. I'll work out some average damage outputs, but overall the numbers will be worked out with unit crunch for the percentage chance to outright slay one party or another. A few of the numbers will be a bit rough and ready, but should be enough to generally get the gist. Then finally for supporting rules, I'm going to keep things at least fairly light. You can have any passive army-wide special rules, though for detachment rules I'm going to keep it a little bit more limited, not tailoring them to try and pick the single best one for every single faction for every character, but be generous enough to allow the index armies that have a primary index detachment that they normally use just to use any passive stuff that they have there. I'm not going to go in for stratagems and command points and things, as that would add a load of extra options, though you can use some generic ones if the model generates command points themselves in some way. Finally, I'll also allow any leader characters to use any buffs that affect themselves as if they were leading a unit. For our main challenger today, here's Fulgrim's rules: 385 points worth of Demon Snake. For his damage he has a Malefic Lash with 6 attacks at Strength 8, AP 2 and Damage 2 with Sustained Hits 1. And then in melee he'll usually be using his strike profile of his Demon Blades, 6 attacks at Strength 14, AP 3 and Damage D6 plus 1 with Sustained Hits, so quite a nice general purpose big damage weapon there. Plus an extra 6 attacks at Strength 6, AP 1 and Damage 1 from his Serpentine Tail, though that won't be quite as effective here. If he hits an enemy and they don't die, his demonic poisons might start to take effect in the next rounds. There's only a small chance of some extra mortal wounds though, so not enormously meaningful. And when the enemy does come to attack back, they'll be hitting his profile at Toughness 11, a 2+ save and a 4+ invulnerable save, and he gets 16 wounds worth of that. Not terrible, but maybe not crazy standout versus his peers at this sort of points cost. Finally, Fulgrim also has fights first. This one's really quite a big deal. For previous contests like this that I've had both combatants attack simultaneously, but this one's kind of so important to Fulgrim that it didn't really make sense to leave it out. It basically means that he gets a really big advantage in the vast majority of fights that he'll be in. If the enemy charges him, he'll usually have the chance to be selected to fight before they do, and if he charges the enemy then he already has fights first where they usually won't. It'll basically give Fulgrim a chance to one-shot the enemy in melee, so it seemed more important to work out the chance of that, which is why I used unit crunch for this one, and then seeing what chance the enemy had of taking him out on the hit back, and then fighting in sequence until we have the chance of one prevailing or the other. Let's get into it though, and we'll start with the Imperium's heroes. First up, none other than the brother who he laid low last time in Roboute Guilliman. Definitely a grudge match here. Guilliman fights with the Emperor's Sword for 7 attacks at Strength 14 and Damage 4, has the Hand of Dominion for a bit of shooting, is able to call an additional Oath of Moment which I'll allow him to use here, assuming something else on the map had eliminated the primary target, and then also gets free stratagems as well, which he's going to use for a wound roll or two. If he dies, he has the chance to get back up again on a 3+, but that'll be at the end of the fight phase, so if that happens then it means that he won't be fighting in that given phase. In any case, when battle is joined, Fulgrim's Malefic Lash doesn't do quite so much, 2 wounds with that, then 9 wounds with the big profile of those demonic blades, with a further small chance for wounds chipped away with the Serpentine Tail. The attacks give him around about a 58% chance to basically kill Guilliman outright and make him roll on the Armour of Fate, which would have a 2/3 chance of passing, but even if he does he won't be hitting back in that same fight phase. Overall though, there's pretty directly a 19% chance of Fulgrim killing him just in one shot. If Guilliman does get a chance to strike though, he'll use Oath of Moment with the boosted +1 to wound and a command reroll for a failed wound roll. The Hand of Dominion has the chance to chip a couple of wounds off at range, but he gets most of the work done in melee with a big 13 wounds there. If he does get the chance to fully activate, then he's got around about a 40% chance to slay Fulgrim in one activation, but due to the chance of him already having been knocked down by that point, it makes it less likely. Then by the second round, both characters also get to make another shooting attack, but then Fulgrim will be fighting first once again. If he hadn't already put Guilliman down to his chance of resurrection, he now has a 95% chance overall, and given that he only stands up with 6 wounds remaining, if he was put down, then Fulgrim has an 84% chance to finish him off. That's boosted with Fulgrim's poisons now, as he will have hit him by this point. Overall, there's a good chance that Fulgrim's just too quick for Guilliman. The Primarch of the Ultramarines needed a good amount of luck to win this contest. It's a Fulgrim victory, with Guilliman having around about a 21% chance to win, if he does get the chance to strike and take a chunk out of Fulgrim. Next up though, let's throw another Primarch into the ring, and for this one we have Lionel Johnson, the other returned Loyalist Primarch, currently 315 points, and he strikes with fealty with 8 attacks at strength 12, AB 4 and damage 4, a couple of shots with his relic Armor Luminous pistol. The Emperor's Shield gives him a 3+ invulnerable save, so significantly harder to take wounds off versus Guilliman, and it might also reflect a mortal wound or two back at Fulgrim. Perhaps the single biggest thing for him though is that he gets fights first, which means he'll be one of the only ones who's actually fighting with Fulgrim on a level playing field, in terms of both of them effectively being able to strike at the same time here. Still looking at Fulgrim's damage first though. The Malefic Lash chips in with a bit of damage, the Demonic Blade's around about 6 on average, a fair bit less than Guilliman, and it'll be super swingy here depending on whether or not the Lion passes those 3+ invulnerable saves or not. Overall, Fulgrim's damage adds up to 8 wounds out of 10 on average, and a chance to slay the Lion worked out at 34%. For the Lion's own attacks, fealty averages around about 10 wounds turn on turn, obviously dispensed in increments of 4 in reality. Armor Luminous and the Emperor's Shield reflecting some attacks chip in a tiny bit of damage. Overall the means around about 11 wounds out of 16 and a chance to slay of 23%. That means that the fight has to go into multiple rounds after that. It seems that after the first, the two sort of level off a little bit. After 2 battle rounds, it looks like Fulgrim's actually got a lower chance of killing Lionel Johnson versus Lion killing Fulgrim. I think that's mainly because of the swinginess of the 3+ invulnerable save, that being the thing that might save the Lion versus Fulgrim just having quite a lot of wounds to chew through. The Lion is slightly ahead in rounds 2 and 3 if it goes to that, but there's a good chance that it won't. Looking at those rounds turn by turn, it does seem to work out that Fulgrim very slightly is odds on to win the battle versus the Lion, 35% victory versus the Lion's 28%, though I thought it was kind of interesting that the single biggest chance is that they kill each other at the same time and it's a draw. Overall they do seem pretty nicely balanced in combat though. A bigger factor might be depending on what sort of supporting rules you allowed them in this, but on a fairly base stat line they're fairly similar. Beyond Primarchs though, let's take a look at some of the other faction leaders of the Imperium. First up we have Morvenn Vahl for 170 points currently, the High Abbess of the Adeptus Sororitas and High Lord of Terror. She fights in a Paragon warsuit with 8 wounds, a 2+ save and a 4+ invulnerable. Strikes with Fidelis, a boosted heavy bolter and a missile launcher at range, and then the Lance of Illumination in melee, which she can boost to a great big +3 attacks. I'll assume that she does have a junk miracle dice on standby to activate that bit. For these contests I also have them count as being able to lead units, so she will get her rerolls to hit and wound as well. Very dangerous but not really all that hard to kill on her own. For Fulgrim's attacks it's really quite a lot of damage, between the 3 profiles adding up to around about 14 wounds compared with Morvenn Vahl's 8, a very odds on to kill her before she gets to strike, around about an 88% chance to bring her down. Morvenn Vahl's damage really is quite impressive if she did get to attack first though, and I guess she would get to inflict the missile launcher and Fidelis damage, which with the rerolls is fairly significant in itself. But then if able to activate the Lance for Illumination, she averages around about 14 wounds or so dealt on average, around about a 38% chance to slay Fulgrim in one activation, but given the fights first she needs to survive him first, unfortunately it's just not very good odds, and there's around about a 95% chance for Fulgrim to take victory in this one. Before we move on to Fulgrim's next opponent or victim, I'll just give a quick shout out to today's video sponsor in Warhammer Combat Cards, basically a Warhammer 40,000 themed mobile game built around a deck of cards themed around the various different factions and armies out there. The idea behind this one is that it's aimed to be a digital reimagining of a classic Citadel card game from the 1980s, apparently the same company that made those is making this. The core idea is that you build up your collection of cards and then level them up to higher levels, unlocking a bunch of different abilities, and then play against new and greater challenges to unlock more resources and potentially other factions and gameplay as you go along. As you can see here, they've very appropriately got a bunch of good stuff for Fulgrim and the Emperor's Children coming out recently, with gaming content coming out in seasons. Here's one example card and a named Reaver. You have a points cost, a health score, ranged and melee damage, plus some unique abilities. This one's an appropriate fear-related debuff. And the general idea is that in battle we have 3 cards ranked up against 3, one acting as the warlord that sets the overall tone and strategy for the deck, like say Abaddon giving out extra damage to everything, or Captain Artemis of the Death Watch hurting one of the enemy cards whenever a new one of yours deploys. You then attack with your ranged psychic or melee power, often playing against decks that opponents have made but are being controlled by an NPC computer. In any case, if you did want a 40k themed mobile game to pass a bit of free time, there'll be links down in the video description. A big thank you to them for sponsoring this one. And they did also give me an arena code as well that can get you a bunch of chaos cards and in-game currency right from the word go. I'll cycle back to them briefly at the end of the video just to talk a few pros, cons and other things. Getting back to it though, next into the ring we have Trajann Valoris of the Adeptus Custodes, 140 points for the Captain General. He's got 7 wounds, a 4+ invulnerable save, and a big 5+ feel no pain on the defensive, so really quite tanky for an infantry character, and can also once per game trigger his moment shackle to give him a 2+ invulnerable save, which he will do to give him a chance at living past Fulgrim's fights first. Then on the counter attack, he'll have 6 attacks at strength 10, AP -2 and damage 3 with the Watcher's Axe, and that'll be helped out by Martial Qatar as well for the lethal hits. For Fulgrim's own attack, the Malefic Lash actually gives a fair bit of damage for this one, given that Trajann Valoris can only trigger that moment shackle for 1 phase, and that does chip a fairly important 2 wounds off, though Fulgrim won't be doing too much in the fight phase, with the blades only averaging around about 2 wounds, a pretty big chance for them to do nothing at all there. Due to the 2+ invulnerable save, Fulgrim is odds on not to be able to kill Trajann Valoris in a single round of combat, only around a 33% chance to kill him. It's probably not going to happen unless he fails one of his saves against his demonic blades. In return though, Trajann Valoris doesn't really have the best profiles for taking down Fulgrim. The Watcher's Axe being strength 10 is maybe a bit unfortunate, even with the lethal hits from Martial Qatar, only averaging turn on turn around about 4 wounds of the 16 needed, and a fractionally tiny chance to kill Fulgrim when he has chance. Fulgrim for his part is almost certain to then go on to slay Trajann Valoris in the next round, where there isn't a 2+ invulnerable save to worry about. As a result, very little chance for Trajann to win this one, though probably as you'd expect being an 140 point model going up against a 385 one. Things aren't so much better for Belisarius Cawl either, 135 points for the Tech Priest of the Adeptus Mechanicus. He is tough at 10 wounds at toughness 8 with a 4+ invulnerable save, and does have some fairly fun and scary damage profiles with strength 14, damage 3 solar atomizer, but again he's not really a foe on Fulgrim's sort of level. In a single round, Fulgrim still odds on to kill him, around about 65%, and even despite Cawl's healing ability, it goes to near certain to finish him off in a second round. Even with his fancy tech, Cawl isn't likely to do all that much to Fulgrim at all, kind of similar to Trajann Valoris in damage output there, and basically the victory is near certainly Fulgrim's. Again, not much better for Lord Solar Leontus. He's fighting with Soul's Righteous Gaze, his Sword Conquest and a bonus command point. Without Belisarius Cawl or Trajann Valoris' big defense stats, Fulgrim's near enough guarantees to kill him in a single round of close combat, and Lord Solar has far less damage output in return. Kaldor Draigo of the Grey Knights, again probably doesn't fancy his chances, though at least his Titan Sword does have the Anti-Demon 2+ keyword on it. If he does live to activate with his invulnerable save, he'll deal quite a lot of damage to Fulgrim on average. Between that and his Scourging Psychic power, at least Fulgrim's toughness 11 wouldn't be an impediment to him. Again though, probably not going to matter when Fulgrim's fighting first in melee. Pretty similar chances to kill him in a single round versus Lord Solar Leontus. Again around about a 94% chance in a single round. For his damage output though, at least Kaldor Draigo does actually offer a bit more fight against Fulgrim than some of the previous due to those demon slaying rules. He averages around about 8 wounds or so to Fulgrim between the Scourging and the Titan Sword, and does add up to around about a 4% chance to slay Fulgrim if he activates. Again, that's the big problem though, given that Fulgrim gets fights first. He's only going to have a 7% chance to be able to attack with that in the first place, so not much hope here. Finally, aside from the butchery of the Imperium's generals though, the last entry for the Imperium is Canis Rex, named Character Knight and Breaker of Chains. Finally a target where Fulgrim's actually trying to pick on someone his own size or bigger. On the defensive, he's going to be far harder to take out. 22 wounds at toughness 12 with a 3+ save and a 6+ feel no pain from the Knight Detachment rule. 1 free stratagem that he can activate per turn. And then some absolutely enormous damage profiles. The Las Impulsor he has d6 shots at strength 14 and damage 4. And as it's Canis Rex, he gets to hit on a 2+, and then also gets critical hits on a 5. And on top of that, Lay Low the Tyrants even gives him a reroll to hit and to wound. Then the melee is even scarier as well. Freedom's Hand with a strike profile, 5 attacks with those sustained hits at strength 20, AP 3 and a massive damage 9. Certainly profiles that have got a good chance to do for Fulgrim. Given the magnitude of Canis Rex's shooting, it actually does matter about the chance they might well end Fulgrim before they've even made close combat. The Malefic Lash chips in a couple of wounds against Canis, but the Las Impulsor averages a big 7 wounds or so, and if it swings high it's got a fair chance to kill Fulgrim outright, 12% or so, due to damage 4 going quite nicely into 16 wounds. When they charge in against each other, Canis Rex will use his free stratagem for a tank shock, so averaging another 4 wounds, and then Fulgrim will be fighting next with his fights first. The Demonic Blades do the majority of the work here, not impeded by an invulnerable save. 12 wounds or so on average after the Feel No Pain. Though given the amount of attacks that Fulgrim has, he's not really very likely to swing high, and only has a 17% chance of killing Canis in just 1 round. For his part on the strike back though, Canis Rex has got a very good chance to end Fulgrim then and there. Between the tank shock and the massive damage of Freedom's Hand, mean damage output is around about 31 wounds against Fulgrim, which is kind of crazy. And overall that's a 90% chance to put the Demon Primarch down, accounting for range and melee combined. If Fulgrim did live to fight for a second fight phase, he's then odds on to kill Canis Rex, going up to a big 85% chance, but it's all a bit too little too late for the Demon Primarch. He might have just got instantly splattered by the Las Impulsor, and then when he's odds on not to kill Canis in the fight phase, Canis Rex is odds on to smash him with the Gauntlet. Overall a big win for the Imperial Knight here, Canis Rex an 82% chance to get victory. Next up though, let's put Fulgrim in the ring with some rival Chaos and his brother Demon Primarchs. The first up we have Abaddon the Despoiler to deal with. The Warmaster of the Black Legion certainly isn't as hard as he used to be to kill with his capped damage, and now only has toughness 5 and 9 wounds with a 4+ invulnerable save to save him from Fulgrim. He certainly brings a fair bit of damage though, being able to reroll all hit rolls with his datasheet rule, Dark Pacts for some sustained hits, and then a massive amount of attacks with Dracnian at strength 14, damage 3 and devastating wounds. Again though, in a 1 versus 1 combat, massive damage isn't going to help you if you can't survive Fulgrim's blades first, and with Fulgrim's combined damage output, that gives him an 87% chance to take down Abaddon before he gets to swing with Dracnian. If he did get the chance to attack, maybe sheltering behind a Terminator bodyguard or something, the results would be fairly spectacular though. He does around about 13 wounds on average with Dracnian turn on turn, that's with sustained hits, and a chance to use a command point if he generates a command point with Dark Pacts in the shooting phase. And overall around about a 1/3 chance to slay Fulgrim if he gets a chance to activate. Again though, it just can't really get around the fact that there's a good chance he'll already be dead by that point. Now for some of the bigger fights though, and it's Fulgrim versus his Demon Primarch brothers. First up we have Mortarion of the Death Guard, 300 points currently, and of course he is the super tanky Demon Primarch. 16 wounds at toughness 12 with a 5+ Feel No Pain, and he'll use the -1 to hit contagion to try and take the edge off Fulgrim's damage. For his own damage output it's not quite so much, but he will chip away turn on turn. He strikes with his great scythe Silence, 5 attacks at strength 14 and damage 4, plus some psychic shooting and the lantern, and he can use reroll 1s to hits from his own self buff. For Fulgrim's damage first, just due to that enormous tanky profile and the 5+ Feel No Pain, he doesn't do quite so much to Mortarion, only around about a 3% chance to kill him outright and 6 wounds managed on average. Mortarion chips in a bit of damage with Rotwind and the Lantern, around about 2 wounds there, and then Silence averages 7 wounds turn on turn to Fulgrim, at least pretty likely to stack a bunch of saves given those rerolls on lethal hits and things. His average damage output is around about 10 wounds to Fulgrim, so an 11% chance to slay him outright. That means that the battle needs to go to further rounds. Mortarion will no longer be able to use his blast weapon attack, as they'll be in close combat from then on. That means that Fulgrim will be striking next and goes up to kill him around about 32% of the time from now. And then if Mortarion survives, he's got the pretty likely chance of 63% chance to kill him. Fulgrim going up to a very Emperor's Children 69% at 3 rounds, and Mortarion having a very good chance of finishing the fight outright after 3 rounds of close combat when he gets to hit once again. Again, this one basically needs to be added up sequentially, because Fulgrim gets that lower chance of killing him in first before Mortarion gets to hit back again, and it actually means that the overall result is kind of close. Fulgrim around about a 43% chance to win, whereas Mortarion's got about a 57% chance. Seems that Fulgrim's quick strikes and poisons over several rounds can't do enough to bring down the Primarch of Plagues. Next up we've got the Sorcerous Might of Magnus, 465 points at the moment, so a fair bit more than Fulgrim. He's got a fairly similar Demon Primarch style stat line, though he will be a fair bit tougher than Fulgrim to take out, given he gets an inbuilt -1 damage. For his damage output, he has an awful lot as well. The Gaze of Magnus with 3d3 shots at strength 9 and damage 3, and with his inbuilt psychic buff he gets a +1 to hit and wound with that, and the index detachment buff giving him some sustained hits. In melee he strikes with the Blade of Magnus, 7 attacks at strength 16 and damage 3, and he also generates enough Kamal points to allow him to reroll a failed save as well, using one of the Kabbalistic rituals from the index. Again, as Magnus has some pretty significant shooting, he actually has enough to have a small chance to kill Fulgrim before they even charge into close combat. The Gaze of Magnus averaging around about 6 wounds, and Tzeentch's Firestorm chipping in a little bit as well. In close combat, as ever, Fulgrim will be hitting first, due to Magnus's trickery rerolling a failed save with a Kabbalistic ritual. The damage output is a little bit muted though, doing around about 7 wounds overall, with an 8% chance to bring down his Tzeentchian brother. Magnus for his part hits back rather hard with the Blade of Magnus with the psychic buffs, averaging 18 wounds overall, so about a 60% chance to slay Fulgrim, and then the next thing that will happen after that is another round of shooting. Another bout of the non-blast Gaze of Magnus will give him around about an 86% chance to have finished off Fulgrim at this point. If Fulgrim does live through that, he's around about 50-50 to finish off Magnus. Overall, putting those events in sequence though, it's a big win for Magnus, Fulgrim only having a 14% chance of victory versus Magnus's 86. Finally, for the Demon Primarch contest, next up we have Angron, 435 points for the Demon Primarch of Khorne. Again, at least a fairly similar stat line to Fulgrim on the defensive side of things, but then he hits hard with Samniarius and Spine Grinder, a big 8 attacks at strength 16, AP -4 and damage d6 +2, and an inbuilt special rule that can allow him to reroll hits. From the Blessings of Khorne, he'll take the 6+ Feel No Pain and the sustained hits, both as really quite easy reliable picks, and given that the counter's charging, I'll allow him to use the Berserker Warband buff of +1 strength and +1 attack, but that bit isn't the most enormous deal in the world. Fulgrim will get to hit him first though, and Angron's defensive profile isn't quite as mighty as his brother's. Even with the 6+ Feel No Pain in effect, Fulgrim does around about 9 wounds to him, and between all attack patterns he's got around about a 15% chance to put Angron down in one go. With his chosen buffs of reroll hits, and then sustained hits from the Blessings, Samniarius and Spine Grinder hit incredibly hard though, averaging 19 wounds on Fulgrim, which leaves him with a 65% chance to kill him dead outright, and then if the combat does go to multiple rounds, Fulgrim then has a 70% chance to finish the job round 2, after which Angron almost certainly ends the combat, as he's got a 97% chance to kill by that point. Overall, putting those together turn on turn, it gives Fulgrim around about a 34% chance of victory, so Angron winning with 66% there, and he is still odds on to win even if he doesn't get the bonus attack out of the Berserker Warbands. It is kind of interesting that the Games Workshop fight, they reported that when they put Fulgrim versus Angron 3 times in a row, that Fulgrim won all 3. I guess it might depend on the context a bit. Maybe if Angron wasn't allowed to use the Blessings of Khorne or something, I think that might just about skew the numbers in Fulgrim's favour, though maybe it seems a little bit harsh not to allow him to use a rule that he'd usually be able to access. With Angron as well, things could also be more complicated with his chance to revive as well, if he went for a normal 5-round game of 40k. If Fulgrim killed him kind of early, there's at least some chance he could just return back onto the table with full health remaining again, and maybe come back for another go. Either way though, with the Blessings of Khorne active, Angron gets victory here. Finally for the Chaos, we have the Dark Master that is Be'lakor. He's the High and Mighty Demon Prince of Chaos Undivided, 375 points, and he recently got a new and upgraded datasheet. His melee damage getting a little bit scarier at 7 attacks with damage d6 +1 and devastating wounds, and he can use one of his buffing rules to reroll hit rolls of 1, which can help out his damage output in general. For Fulgrim's attacks between the Malefic Lash and the Demonic Blades, he does around about 12 wounds to Be'lakor on average, so about a 13% chance to banish the Demon Prince back to the warp. But then in return it looks like Be'lakor can muster some fairly mighty damage. Betraying Shades at 3 wounds and then the Blade of Shadows at 13 on average, so just about roughly kills Fulgrim, around about a 50% chance to slay him, even if there's a small chance that he'd be dead already by that point. Before Fulgrim gets to attack in melee again though, he'd get to use Betraying Shades again, which does actually raise the chance of Fulgrim being slain up to 66%, so a lot more convincing numbers there. If Fulgrim doesn't die though, then he's odds on to take down Be'lakor. His odds rise to 70, before again Be'lakor is most likely to finish the fight between his melee and shooting. Overall certainly puts Be'lakor odds on to be victorious here, but not overwhelmingly so. For every 3 fights, 2 of them are likely to go Bellacor's way and 1 Fulgrim's. Finally, we've got the deities and faction commanders of the Xenos. Starting with the Eldari, I thought would give the honour to the Avatar of Khaine. 300 points worth of Might of the War God. A tough molten body with toughness 11, 14 wounds and a 4+ invulnerable save, but most importantly the opportunity to half damage. So it's going to take a massive amount of work to bring him low. And then he strikes with the Wailing Doom that's particularly good against big single models like Fulgrim. Strength 16, AP -4 and damage D6 +2, both at range and in melee. With Fulgrim's attacks, he's got a good chance to take a good chunk out of the Avatar, but unless he rolls spectacularly high, he's unlikely to one-shot it, averaging around about 7 wounds, but due to that half damage, very unlikely to actually bring it down, only a 4% chance to kill it after fighting first. For the Avatar's part, with 7 really big hitting attacks at damage D6 +2, he averages 11 wounds to Fulgrim, and then the next thing that will happen will be further shooting, and that extra attack with the Wailing Doom again ups the chance significantly. After that extra attack, there's around about a 1/3 chance to have slain the Demon Primarch. Then Fulgrim will hit back once more after his second round, having a much better 50% chance to have brought down the Avatar. Then basically things escalate from there, the Avatar and Fulgrim getting yet more likely to have killed each other with each interaction. Overall, between all that and due to Fulgrim fighting first, the result is maybe a little bit closer than it might have looked, just due to Fulgrim getting in his chances to kill in first. It's a narrow victory for the Avatar of Khaine, a 42% chance for Fulgrim to win and around about a 58% chance for the Avatar to take victory, triumphing over a hated servant of the great enemy. For the Drukhari, they really need Azrael Vet to come back and give them a big central leader. In absence of him, we've got Drazhar rather nervously putting himself into the ring, wielding the Executioner's Demiclaves and getting some precision and +1 to wound against Fulgrim if he gets to make an attack, which he probably won't. Even more so than some of the other characters, even the Malefic Lash is wounding Drazhar really quite convincingly here. There's around about a 98% chance for Fulgrim to take him down before he even gets to make attacks, making their damage profile a bit redundant, not that they would have been enormously stand out anyway. For a bigger and meatier foe though, next we've got the Swarmlord, the Tyranid Alpha Commander taking direct control of the nearby swarms, and also being a fearsome combatant in its own right with its psychic might and its Bone Sabers. The Bone Sabers are maybe just a little bit unfortunate in their strength 10, always being in synapse range, not quite wounding Fulgrim on anything better than a 5+, though I guess the Twin Linked helps a little bit. He'll generate a command point that he can plug into a saving throw to give him better chance to survive to swing back, though he doesn't have the biggest defense profile in the world, at 10 wounds, toughness 10 with a 4+ invulnerable. For Fulgrim's attacks, they have quite a good chance to one-round him, even if you are using the free command points to reroll a save. Fulgrim's got around about a 50% chance to slay the Swarmlord outright, going up to a big 90 over 2 rounds. For his own part, he just doesn't really have enough damage outputs to really make it matter in the turn that he's got. The Bone Sabers average around about 2 failed saves, so around 6 wounds on Fulgrim, only having a very tiny chance of rolling super high, punching up, and actually killing him, only about 1%. As a result, it's actually a surprisingly massive victory for Fulgrim here, pretty well guaranteed to win. It does seem that he's just rather good against sort of medium-sized monsters. One of those though that might give Fulgrim significantly more challenge is Ghazghkull Thraka. The big boss of the Orcs costs 235 points to play in game, and his defensive profile's an interesting one. 10 wounds with a 4+ invulnerable save to take out the boss, though he has a trick up his sleeve in having Makari along from the right, a rather suspiciously lucky Gretchen, who gets a 2+ invulnerable save, so does have the chance to bounce a fair few attacks before he takes one and dies. For his damage, Ghazghkull softens up the target with Mork's Roar, but of course his main damage is in close combat. 6 attacks with Gork's Claw at strength 14, AP 3 and damage 4. I will allow him to call the War Battle Round 1 for an extra attack as well, and that means he should get some lethal hits in melee, as well as his squad leader buff for +1 to hit and wound. Fulgrim might be a little bit of a slightly unfortunate opponent for Ghazghkull though, as he's basically got lots of extra attacks that have a good chance of slaying Makari before the really big important ones with those demonic blades get to work. If he attacks first with that Malefic Lash and then rolls the Serpentine Tail next after that, he actually has almost a 70% chance to have got that pesky 2+ invulnerable save out of the way. Though even if he does have Makari still intact, he's still got at least some chance to kill Ghazghkull, with the attacks if Makari goes down early and Ghazghkull rolls badly. Overall, from a single activation, there's around about a 50% chance to slay both Ghazghkull and Makari, raising up to very near certain after 2 rounds of close combat. For Ghazghkull's part, Mork's Roar doesn't really do much to Fulgrim, particularly if fired at Orc Ballistic skill. Gork's Claw is really quite punchy though, around about 11 wounds on average, and almost a 30% chance to put down Fulgrim if he does get to strike. Again, he doesn't have all that much chance though, and Fulgrim's got around about an 82% chance of victory here. For the Leagues of Votann, Uthar is going to have to try and be a bit more destined than normal. He's 80 points for a fighty Cawl, striking with the Blade of the Ancestors for Strength 6, AP 3 and Damage 2 and Devastating Wounds. He's got the ability to make one of them an automatic Devastating Wound, and quite a nice defensive rule that reduces all damage characteristics to 1. Though again, that would be more helpful if Fulgrim didn't have backup weapons like his tail attacks and Malefic Lash. I felt like it was fairly safe to assume that Fulgrim will be one of the targets marked for double judgment here as well. Due to the amount of attacks that Fulgrim has, it does mean that even Uthar with his damage 1 thing is very likely to die in one round, around about a 91% chance to bring him down, which was as much to do with the Serpentine Tail and Malefic Lash as anything else. If he does get to strike, he can at least poke a bit of damage through with that automatic mortal wound thing, but basically Fulgrim wins big on this one. There's probably not too much more hope for Commander Farsight here either. I could have gone for Shadowsun as a faction commander, but I thought seeing as he's an actual melee combatant it made a little bit more sense. He gets a free stratagem for a command point reroll to try and survive, a damage 3 plasma rifle and some punchy attacks with a Dawn Blade, both at +1 to wound if they're within 9 inches. At least with the command point reroll, he's a little bit less certain to die than some of Fulgrim's opponents, around about an 86% chance to be laid low, presuming he's saving a command point reroll for those demonic blades. They're still not really going to help all that much though. He averages around about 4 wounds to Fulgrim, presuming that plasma rifle's within 9 inches, but he doesn't really have any hope of taking down a Demon Primarch by himself. As expected, another easy victory for Fulgrim here. Finally though, we've got a pair of big challenges left from the Necrons in the Silent King and the Nightbringer. Starting with the big boss of the Necrons himself, Sarek the Silent King is 420 points. Really quite a big intimidating stat line with 16 wounds himself, and then 2 Triarchal Menhirs to absorb some damage, and all with a good 2+ save and 4+ invulnerable. For his damage he has a whole host of different profiles. While they're alive, those Menhirs can spit out big Annihilator beams of damage 6, and he's got some mixed shooting from him and one of his Triarch members as well, and then the Scythe of Dust in close combat does 12 attacks at strength 8 with lethal hits. And he's also got a self-damage buff for reroll 1s to hit and wounds. If he survives combat as well, he's got the chance to heal up a bit with reanimation protocols. The Silent King is certainly a really mighty stat line to try and chew through. Fulgrim's attacks come in at around about 12 wounds or so out of the 26 that the Silent King has got, so pretty much guaranteed not to kill him, and give the Silent King some chance towards healing. Those Menhirs help soak up a fair bit of damage as well, eating a little bit of damage due to overkill. When Zarek hits back, it's quite hard as well, but he's not likely to one-round Fulgrim. The shooting chipping in somewhere around about 7 wounds or so, and then the Scythe of Dust, maybe 2 or 3 failed saves. The average damage output lands around about 12 wounds against Fulgrim's 16, with about a quarter chance to kill him. That is significantly better than the 1% chance that Fulgrim had though. The next thing that happened will be the Silent King doing some more shooting. There's a reasonable chance he's lost a Menhir or 2 at this point, which I tries to factor in. Then Fulgrim gets to activate again. The Silent King's reanimated D3 wounds at this point, but even so in 2 rounds of combat Fulgrim's got around about and a quarter chance to bring him down. The Silent King hits back hard once again, and then if Fulgrim gets to fight for a 3rd round, he's around about a 2/3 chance to take down Zarek. Certainly a pretty redoubtable profile. If you've got a pretty reasonable chance to survive a Demon Primarch on full damage for 3 successive fight phases. Overall though, this one just maths out at a fairly big win for Zarek, a pretty reasonable chance to off Fulgrim before he gets to fight for a 2nd time. It looks like it's around about an 80% chance for a win for the Silent King and a 20% for Fulgrim. Finally, the Necrons get a bonus entry in the Catan Shard of the Nightbringer. Always quite a fun one to throw at the latest big bad. He's a shard of a soul-hungry star god. Over 305 points, the Catan defense is well known to be absolutely enormous. Toughness 11 with 12 wounds and a 5+ feel no pain, but also a half damage characteristic stacked on top of that, which is just crazily immense, never mind the Necron reanimation protocols. The Nightbringer is also the big damage one, with the Gaze of Death being a big hitting anti-tank weapon at the shooting phase, and then the Scythe of the Nightbringer with 6 attacks at damage D6+2 and devastating wounds. He's also got the chance to drain some life at the end of the fight phase as well. With the big damage potential of the Demon Blades, Fulgrim does have the chance to make some sort of damage at least, but given the sheer barriers with the half damage and the feel no pain, only around about 4 or 5 wounds out of 12 on average, and a very low chance to actually kill the Nightbringer in a single round, around about 1.5%. For the Nightbringer's part, he's going to hit very, very hard. Between the Gaze of Death, the Scythe, and the chance to drain some life, he does around about 14 wounds of Fulgrim's 16 on average, about a 38% chance to kill. On the 2nd activation, presuming Fulgrim lives long enough to fight there, He still only has around about a 16% chance to bring down the Nightbringer, certainly not helped by the Star God healing D3 wounds. When the Nightbringer hits back once again, he's around about an 80% chance to kill Fulgrim. He can't use the Gaze of Death due to the blast keyword though at this point, which does take it down a little bit compared with what it would be. But even if Fulgrim does survive to fight 3 rounds in a row, he still only has around about a 40% chance of killing the Star God. Overall, between all that put together, it's a big win for the Nightbringer. Fulgrim just not really having the stat line that's capable to take down the sheer beefiness of it. I guess the Nightbringer's not paying any sort of premium for the speed that Fulgrim has. The two are kind of opposites, with Fulgrim moving super fast and having fights first, and the Nightbringer being a slow inevitable death coming across the battlefield. Overall, putting all of that together, it maybe feels like it hasn't been the best outing for Fulgrim against the challenges of Warhammer 40k. Out of the 21 faction leaders, he's killed 13 out of them, though the majority of them probably targets that weren't really all that worthy of him. Generals and commanders that cost far less points cost, and basically anything that was around about the same sort of points level as him he tended to struggle against a little bit. Probably his biggest kills were the 2 Loyalist Primarchs in Lionel Johnson and Roboute Guilliman. I guess that's probably true to form that he's a bit more practiced at killing Loyalist Primarchs. And here are some of the targets that were most assured of their victory against Fulgrim. Magnus having around about a 90% chance, the Nightbringer 83, Canis Rex also being up there, Zarek the Silent King, and then Be'lakor and Angron after that. It seems at least from a one-on-one kind of fight, if the target doesn't have enough damage and Fulgrim's got a pretty good chance to one-round them, then there's a good chance that he just wins spectacularly easily due to the fights first. But if he doesn't have the damage to kill some of these big targets, and he can fairly comfortably tank his first round of close combat, things have a pretty good chance of not working out all that well for him. Neither his damage output nor his defense seems to be particularly crazy for 385 points, at least compared with the competition. Though I guess in a real game he's likely to be able to pick and choose his fights a lot better, having faster movement than basically anything that he's fought against here. And that fights first meaning that is bad news for anything that's a sort of medium-sized unit that wants to deal damage to him in close combat. In any case, it's been interesting to put the new Demon Primarch through his paces and see which foes are a worthy opponent for him in-game. Look forward to hearing your thoughts down in the comments below. That's just about it for this one, though I'll just briefly cycle back to Warhammer Combat Cards, the video sponsor, for those who are interested. As mentioned in the earlier segment, they're a Warhammer 40,000 themed mobile game, if you do want something to pass the time appropriate to the setting. I did play this one myself for a bit, to get a bit of a better grasp. For positives of it, I do quite like the sort of constant sense of progression, never really losing anything in a majorly big way, which is nice enough if you want something to fill gaps in the day which aren't going to be too pressured for any one fight. The games are fairly short and punchy, and there is a bit of genuine strategy there as well, at the deck building level, choosing which warlords to build around, the card's abilities and how to match them up, and probably a fair bit of high level stuff that I'm missing. I guess for criticisms and downsides, it is a mobile free-to-play game with all that entails. I certainly go in expecting a bit of foreign entertainment and not too much more than that. If you've got no interest in mobile games, then it's probably not going to appeal, of course. The strategy is maybe a little bit on the limited side within actual games of it. It does feel a bit more focused on the deck building aspect to me, and can be a little bit grindy, even if not that against that in the mobile game. With lots of these, there's the inevitable item shop and microtransactions and things. Maybe not necessarily pay to win, but perhaps pay to succeed easier or faster perhaps. I personally tend to stay away from any sort of shops like that in-game. That's kind of defeating the point a bit for me. In any case though, thanks to them for sponsoring this one. There'll be links down in the video description. As mentioned, they've got a bunch of interesting stuff for the Emperor's Children coming out recently. They do tend to have content waves themed in with different 40k releases, such as this year having release waves for Krieg Eldari, and now the Servants of Slaanesh. There's quite a lot of cards and content to explore at the moment, over 1,000 cards active in the game currently. There'll be links down in the video description if you'd like to check them out, and as mentioned there's an arena code for 40 Chaos cards and a bunch of in-game currency if you do want to check it out. In any case though, I'll leave that one there for now. Let me know your thoughts on the Fulgrim fights down in the comments below. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see more like this. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming, with new ones out just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, or you'd just like to help support, Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page and a few affiliate discount links for various Warhammer sellers around the world. A big thank you to anyone supporting via those. In any case though, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.